What if the closure that you've been waiting for is never going to come from the person who hurt you? You keep explaining, keep waiting for an apology. You keep, uh, waiting for the explanation, the acknowledgement. They finally say, "You were right, I hurt you." But what if they never say it? What if they tell a completely different version of the story? And what if your healing has to begin without their participation? So, this is our dinner chat for tonight. So, grab dinner, grab your coffee, let's talk about it. So, closure doesn't always come from a conversation. Sometimes we believe that we need to have a final conversation, a phone call, explanation, apology, admission of wrongdoing. Closure isn't something that somebody can give you or a situation can give you. Sometimes closure comes from within and from within yourself. It says, "I already know enough about what happened to make a different decision about my future." You may never get the apology that you deserve. This is one of the hardest realities that you have to accept. Some people will never hurt, they'll never apologize, not because that you were hurt, not because what happened wasn't important, but because admitting the truth would require them to take responsibility. You can't force somebody to develop accountability. Waiting indefinitely for their apology can keep you emotionally connected to the very situation that you were trying to escape. Stop waiting for them to understand your pain. You may spend years thinking if they could just understand what they did, everything would make sense. But sometimes they just won't understand. Sometimes they'll minimalize. Sometimes they'll deny it. Sometimes they'll blame you. Sometimes they'll tell other people a completely different story. Your healing can't depend on someone else's ability or willingness to understand your experience. Closure can be accepting what you cannot change. Closure doesn't necessarily mean I'm okay with what happened. It can mean I accept that it happened, I can't change it, and I'm choosing what happens next. That is very, very powerful. You're not approving of the past, you're refusing to let the past control the rest of your life. You don't need their permission to move on. You don't need them to say you can move forward. You don't need them to agree with your decision. You don't need them to understand your boundaries. You don't need them to validate every detail of your experience. At some point, you can just simply decide, I'm done waiting. And that decision can become the beginning of your freedom. Sometimes the pattern is the closure. The cycle is the closure. Look at what repeatedly happens, how people behave, the choices they make, what they say, what they do. Did they apologize and repeat the behavior, or did they promise to change but never change? Did they blame you every time, or did they constantly disrespect your boundaries? Did you repeatedly leave conversations feeling confused, guilty, and drained? Sometimes you're looking for an explanation when the pattern has already given you the answer. Sometimes the pattern is the information. Forgiveness is not required for closure. You don't have to pretend something didn't hurt. You just don't have to, and you don't have to reconcile with someone. You don't have to restore access. You don't have to forgive somebody. You just need to work towards peace without reopening the relationship. Healing doesn't require reconciliation. So don't let their silence keep you stuck. Sometimes silence becomes its own form of waiting. You check your phone. So you wonder if they'll reach out. You imagine what they'll say. You replay conversations. You wonder if they're thinking about you. And eventually you have to ask yourself this question: how much of my life am I willing to spend waiting for other people to do things? Your life is right now in front of you. So closure can be choosing yourself. Maybe closure is leaving a conversation, changing boundaries, stopping the explanations, deleting the number, going to therapy, writing the letter that you will never send, starting over, building your confidence again, creating a life that isn't centered around what happened to you. Closure can just be action, not a conversation. So you need to ask yourself, what if I never get the apology? What if I never get an explanation? You may never hear them admit what happened. And yes, that hurts. And yes, that is painful. but your future cannot depend permanently on somebody else's willingness to acknowledge your past. Sometimes closure is realizing you don't need them to tell you what you already know. You can acknowledge what happened, learn from it, take responsibility for your own part, set new boundaries, grieve what you've lost, and begin rebuilding. Not because they finally gave you closure, but because you decided that your life was worth moving forward. So, have you ever waited for an apology or an explanation that never came? When and what made you help that helped you stop waiting and start moving forward? Here's the other question. Can you find closure without ever receiving an apology from the person who hurt you? I want you to share your thoughts below. Please join the community. I'm posting things every day in the community to help us grow, to help us learn. You know, because here's the thing, it's not about surviving, it's about learning to thrive. So, how am I going to leave you? As I always leave you, get healthy, be healthy, stay healthy. Healthy is much more than physical health. It's mental health. It's emotional health. It's financial health. Get strong, stay strong, be strong. What's strength? Physical strength, emotional strength, mental strength, financial strength. And remember, it's not about surviving, it's about thriving. Just surviving is just doing the bare minimum. And yes, sometimes we have to do the bare minimum, but we can start doing the bare minimums and then do something a little more each day till we learn to thrive. And we thrive financially, we thrive emotionally, we thrive mentally, and we thrive in our strengths, our emotional strengths, our mental strengths. So Midwest Survivor, I'll see you here shortly for dinner chat. This was just a brief dinner chat from last night. Take care. Have a good day.